The fragrance of selfless love that has drawn the world into one family. The truth of an eternal message that has been revealed through every act and word. The fulfillment in service that has been taught by relentless sacrifice. The Lord's own life is indeed His message.
Sai Ram, and welcome to the special serial entitled The Message of the Lord. Today's episode being the fourth in the series. If you recall, the take-home lesson from the last episode was that every one of our actions, no matter what, must be in tune with our intrinsic Atmic nature. Maybe that sounds a bit complicated. Let us consider a simple analogy.
In India, there are two basic styles of classical music. Hindustani music, which is popular in the north, and Carnatic music, which is popular in the south. Central to both of these is an instrument called the tambura, which essentially supplies a drone and helps the musician to remain on key. When the musician sings or plays an instrument, the musician must not go off key. When music goes off key, here is how it sounds. That was not very pleasant, was it? It is the same sort of thing in life. Here, Satya and Dharma are like the basic drone provided by the tambura. And no matter what the action is and who performs it, it must always be aligned to truth and righteousness. No one is exempt from the king to the pauper, and this applies 24/7, period. That's not very complicated, is it? By the way, this is a universal rule, and this same rule applies to all. That is precisely why Swami often tells us that there is no such thing as Indian truth, Pakistani truth, American truth, and so on.
సత్యమనేటువంటిది అమెరికా సత్యము, జర్మనీ సత్యము, జపాన్ సత్యము, ఇండియా సత్యము, పాకిస్తాన్ సత్యము అనే సత్యములకు ప్రత్యేకత లేదు.
Truth cannot be divided as American truth, Indian truth, Pakistan truth or Chinese truth.
అన్ని దేశముల యందు కూడాను సత్యం ఒక్కటే.
In all nations, truth is one.
అట్టి సత్య మార్గమును మనము దైవంగా విశ్వసించి మనం ఆరాధన చేయాలి.
Truth is to be recognized as God, and we have to.
ఈనాడు లోకములో ఇన్ని విధమైనటువంటి అవస్థలకు గురి కావటము, ఇన్ని పరిస్థితుల ప్రభావము లేచిపోవటము, దీనికంత మూల కారణము సత్యము తప్పిపోవటమే మూల కారణం.
The main cause why the world is trouble torn and is undergoing so many adversities today is because we have forgotten truth.
The amazing thing is that though the basic principle is really very simple, in practice people hardly ever seem to remember it and follow the principle. And that is where all problems arise.
Why does one forget something that is so simple and not at all difficult to remember? But before that, there's an even more basic question. Why should I follow Satya and Dharma? Why should I be true to the Atmic principle? Okay, the Atma is there within me, but what's so great about that?
So, why should you be in tune with the Atma? Swami gives the following answer. From God you have come, and to God you must return. Life is essentially a journey to God, no matter whether you are a teacher or a doctor or an engineer or even a businessman.
There is the answer. Life is really a journey back to God. And we obviously cannot reach God by following adharma, can we? So that takes care of the basic question why we must be true to our real nature. which is that of the Atma.
By the way, those of you who are familiar with Shakespeare's play Hamlet might remember that Polonius tells his son Laertes, "This, above all, to thine own self be true, and it must follow, as the night the day, thou canst not be false to any man." Going back now to the first question about forgetfulness. If you remember, we discussed that last time. Basically, it is the mind which constantly tries to divert our attention from God. So, if we learn to keep the mind under check, then we can get on with the business of living life in a manner that would enable us to return to God, who, by the way, is waiting anxiously for us to come back. Notwithstanding all that has been said, it is a fact of life that people do falter and are not always true to themselves. That is to say, there are invariably many lapses in the strict adherence to Satya and Dharma during one's life. The question then arises, clearly, with a shaky track record like that, one cannot attain God at the end of one's life? Is that person's life a total waste? The answer is, not exactly. You see, during a given birth, there is always some positive progress towards God. However, the goal is not reached. The net result is that reunion with God is made through many lives, except perhaps in rare cases. Thus it is that there is a repeated cycle of births and deaths. That is to say, every birth is followed by death, which is then followed by a new birth, after which death comes again, and so on. In some respects, it is like going through school. A kid is admitted at the age of 5, say, in the lowest class of the school. Thereafter, the student has to work his or her way through class after class till he or she finally graduates from high school. In between, if the performance in a class is not good, the student may even have to repeat that class. Where spiritual evolution is concerned, progress is usually far more bumpy, rather like the stock market graph sometimes. Is there no end to all this? Is there no end to this at all? Does one keep going up and down endlessly? Of course there is an end. And a traditional Indian version of snakes and ladders gives a hint. What you see here is that unlike the usual snakes and ladders in the Indian version, which by the way is based on spirituality, after a certain stage one reaches a safe zone. Once one is in the safe zone, merger with God is only a matter of time. As one becomes more and more refined, God gives a helping hand to pull the person over to Him, rather like a mother bending down to lift a child that is on the ground and crying. Do you want God to give a helping hand real quick? No problem, for Swami has given a simple formula for that. In fact, if you remember, that is the very first thing he did on 20th October 1940 when he announced to the world that he was the avatar of this age.
Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Shivaya Namo.
In a nutshell, Swami says, always think of me and constantly chant my name, and that should help you navigate safely through the storms life inevitably throws up. This is the simplest way of breaking the cycle of repeated births and deaths. If you think about it, it is all a bit strange, really. I mean, here we are, constantly hailing Swami as God, and all the time he says, "My dear child, This is all you have to do to become one with me. In fact, I am waiting to extend my hand to you. But the sad thing is that you are making hardly any effort to come towards me. Why on earth is that? Here is Baba really trying hard to help us, and we don't want to grab his helping hand. Why? Swami himself has given the answer, and in brief it is that though we swear that we love Baba and all that, in truth we are really more attracted by the so-called goodies of the world than Swami's teachings. Swami explains it all as follows. He says, take a look at a really very young baby, just a few days old, say. Sometimes, for no apparent reason, the baby smiles. What is the baby smiling about? It is too young to know anything about the world, and yet it is smiling. The reason why the baby is smiling is because it is in touch with God from whom it has come. It is smiling because it is in communion with the Atma, which is its true nature. Do you understand? Do you follow? Swami continues, O man, your true nature is the Atma, and Atma is bliss. So if you want to be happy, seek bliss, which would come to you only if you tune yourself to the Atma. But what do? The wrong thing. As a tiny baby, you seek me. But when you start growing up, you become fascinated by the world and start seeking happiness there. This starts in childhood, becomes a habit, and persists when you grow older. Result? God becomes a lower priority than the world because you think that the attractions of the world would give you more happiness than God.
God is always there, right? And He'll never go away. So what's the hurry to rush Him up? In the meanwhile, what's wrong if I have some fun?
That precisely is how humans land up in trouble. And once you are in trouble, you cry for me saying, Oh Swami, where are you? Can't you see I'm in deep trouble? Why don't you help me? And so on. My dear fellow, I was always there in your heart, but did you ever bother to give me even a tinkle? Ask yourself that question first. So there it is. The next time we face difficulties and start blaming Swami for not taking care of us, we must first ask ourselves why we are having problems. The answer is simple. If we forget God and pay too much attention to the world, problems would come to us like a fly rushes towards a sweet. Swami warns us against all this by repeatedly telling us, Oh man, deluded by an enemy called desire, who poses as a friend, you go after cheap imitations in the wide world outside. Transient happiness is outside, while bliss is inside. The mind would always drag you to the outside, while the Atma always welcomes you inside. Bliss can never come to you if you listen to your mind and wander outside. Listen to the voice of God within. Seek Him within, and you are sure to find bliss. So now the question becomes, how do I lead my regular life and yet maintain God focus? There are any number of ways of doing that. And in fact, Swami has mentioned many of them. For example, while going in a car, you can listen to bhajans and join the singing. You can try and help others and thus engage in service. This is another. Sometimes it becomes necessary to focus on one's job because that is important, like in the case of a pilot or surgeon. Obviously, when the surgeon is operating, he has to concentrate on what he is doing. And clearly, he cannot be focusing on chanting the name of Baba. However, Swami has given us a simple way out of this apparent difficulty. He says, Just think of me before you start the surgery. Thereafter, you do your work the way you ought to. And when it is all over, just say a word of gratitude to God. That is all. If you do that, you would in fact be united with me throughout. And believe me, I shall see you through the most difficult of surgeries. And this formula can be adopted by anyone, including an airline pilot, for example. But you know something? All this calls for some strong willpower, and if you don't have it, then the mind can easily distract you. I know that people often say, "Oh, the mind is so difficult to control." Even Arjuna threw up his hands and complained about it to Krishna. And this is the Kali age. There are so many things that constantly draw our attention away. What are we to do? We are utterly helpless. Is this really true? Are we utterly helpless, as we often claim? Has not Swami told us again and again, "I am in you, below you, above you, behind you, before you," etc.? Has he also not told us repeatedly, "Why fear when I am here?" The question really is, how many are dead serious about following Swami's teachings? You know, when people really want to achieve something they think is important to them, they take enormous trouble. People do all sorts of things to get into the Guinness Book of Records. I do not know if you can quite see it, but here in this photo, a man is walking on a rope wire strung between the Twin Towers in New York before they came down on 11th September 2001. Take a look at the plane flying above. It is an awesome thing to try a feat like this. People do all sorts of things just to become famous. We are not criticizing such people, but merely trying to tell you that when a person is determined to do something, often that person is ready to sacrifice a lot to achieve that goal. So the question is, if one is ready to do all sorts of risky things just to become famous, why not do something that would not only please God, but also bring us closer to Him and to bliss?
साई प्रसन्न होगा साई मेरा मैं तेरा ये प्रेम की बहती धारा.
In short, if we are serious about loving Swami, then we must ask ourselves, as Baba wants us to, do I ever cry whenever people blatantly flout Dharma? So the bottom line really is, deep in my heart, do I really ache for God? It is always easy to connect to Baba, no matter where one is. As he says, I am always available on call 24/7, no matter where you are. You do not need a laptop or a cell phone to contact me. My connection to you is heart to heart, and Om is my phone number. In fact, you can use any name of God and you are sure to reach me. And if you dial me with full faith, not partial faith and doubts, mind you, then be assured that I shall and will rush to your help.
That is the take-home lesson of this episode. God is our only true friend, and He's available on call 24/7, provided we place perfect and unconditional trust in Him. Well, that is all that we have for today. Thank you for being with us, and we do hope that you're enjoying our presentation. Do join us again tomorrow. Jai Sai Ram.